Anyways, so you have a really great piece that just came out in Washington Examiner. Is that right?
Washington Examiner magazine. So it came out on Friday night. It's like in print today. It is called A Murder in Portland. May I tell you a little bit about it?
Please,
because
please.
You read it.
I read it because I'm the best. But for those who have not yet, here's a little background.
Yeah, so the way it happened was in late August, I woke up in the morning and Michael Moynihan, as some of you know from Fifth Column Podcast, and well, formerly of Vice, he's no longer with Vice, sent me a little tiny clip from the Oregonian newspaper. I've been covering Portland, as a lot of people know, for a couple of years. I used to live there. And it was about a woman that had been murdered. Mother of 6 had been murdered, and the reason her murderer had been a repeat offender. He was the father of the 2 youngest children. He'd been assaulting her all summer, and a bail fund only for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people came in, put up $2,000, got him out of jail. He went back and murdered her. After he'd been assaulting her all summer, 5 counts of strangulation, ripping off his GPS. It was just this, well, I found all this out, not from Michael that night. When I looked, and it just didn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. It was like, how do you have this level of continued violence that authorities are aware of? I mean, there are you've got to read the story. There's so many instances where you would say, how do you let this person out? I mean, he knelt on her windpipe and said, now I'm going to put you to sleep. I'm going to kill you. Put a gun to her head. And yet every time he would be arrested and just let out no bail. Let out no bail until the last time, $2,000 bail, the bail fund, and then he killed her. So I spent time writing about that story. I mean, you know, bail reform is a very complicated issue. Criminal justice reform is a complicated issue. You want to try to do better. We should do better. But in my opinion, you need to keep violent criminals in jail. Yeah. And they didn't do this. And it's become a series of, it's like a circular firing squad in Portland now. You've got the DA pointing the finger at the bail fund that bailed him out. You've got the bail fund saying, well, you know, the judge put the bail of $2,000, not our fault that we bailed him out. You've got the citizens of Portland that are like, wait, no, we want this. We don't want people to stay in jail for nonviolent crimes. We're like, okay, but this was a violent crime. Mm-hmm. So I wrote that story. That's in print today. Yeah, go read it. And I wrote a companion piece that is over on my Substack, nancyrommelmann.substack.com, about exactly how Portland finds herself in this position. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty devastating. And I don't know, she's painted herself into a corner. And I'm not really sure it's going to get better before it gets worse.
Now, and she was, correct me if I'm wrong, the 60th homicide
of the year. We ended the year. We broke the record for, I say we because I lived in Portland from 2004 to 2019. Last year they set a record at 92. And now it was 98 this year, though. Could be a little higher. It depends on like what you're counting and where.
And do you have comparisons to when you were living there?
Oh, yeah, it was in the 20s.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, okay, look, you can say, well, Portland was there were not a lot of homicides there at that time. Yes, a lot of things have changed. You've had the summer of rage. You've had a very progressive DA step in. You had a mayor who, during the summer of rage, when Trump had sent federal forces, you had the city so angry at Trump and so angry at the mayor and so angry at the process and so angry about George Floyd and so angry that they insisted on changes that felt like they were, I sometimes think of the do-gooders doing bad things. Like they think it's the right thing, but in practice, they haven't really thought it through. And one thing I will also say, you know, I was on the ground during those protests, getting tear gas, standing with thousands of people, you know, in front of the federal building and, you know, fuck Ted Wheeler, the mayor, and screaming. I must have heard George Floyd's name screamed 5,000 times. The woman that I wrote about, Rachel Abraham, no one screamed her name. Yeah. No one said a word. It's like, you know, she also happens to be Black, by the way. Yeah. She is she's collateral damage for the experimentation they're going to try to put in place in Portland. We saw the same thing happen in Philadelphia. Larry Krasner is a very progressive DA. Murders were over 300. And even though it was a Republican, he was Democrat, a Republican House, they impeached him. And people are like, yeah, well, that's just politics. I'm like, it's also 300 murders.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's politics.
Something isn't working. Policies were put in place that were supposed to alleviate a problem potentially, but instead it seems it's just caused more.
You have to keep violent criminals in jail. I'm sorry. I understand that we are trying to right historical wrongs, and I understand we should not jail people for small amounts of drugs. Of course not. But you have people that are committing violence, and you know what? Not just violence against each other, which is, what's happening. There's a lot of gang play and a lot of gun play, but against women and children. And it's like, is that your solution? Mm-hmm. Your solution is to take something that was historically bad and create something that's historically bad now? It got me I bless Michael for sending me that item, and I just dug into it and wrote them.
Did he think it would get as big as it has?
Well, I've been on the Fifth Column a bunch of times. I love these guys. They record at my house. He knows that I'm interested in Portland. Portland, for me, is the story that keeps on giving because I was there, and it's just, there's always something that they're doing that you're like, what are you doing? We also have, I've written about it recently. I was there in the spring. they decriminalized drugs. Great.
Yeah.
I agree with this. But there was no complimentary, let's offer some drug treatment. So Joe, the streets of Portland, including really nice areas, it's just littered with people lying on the streets. They're just lying there or just shooting up. And these are young people. It's heartbreaking. Yeah. And the city is like, nope, we're being good citizens. People have to make their own choices. Nancy, what do you think you should tell people what they should do with their lives? I'm like, no, but is this better?
Yeah.
If you're going to make this legal, great. Offer them some help. Offer them a way out of this life. Because being a drug addict it might be a choice, but it's also a prison that they can't get out of. So Portland has not stopped giving me stuff to write about.
Well, and it opens up a larger sort of, is it a can of worms? I guess. About bail reform. Portland is not the only one that is going through this. New York is going through this. I shared with you in the green room a situation I went through with an extradition and somewhat a stalker I've had to deal with. And essentially knowing that if the person is brought here, bail will not be set, they will be released and end up closer to me.
So coming from another state.
Another state, and then with no way of getting home, just stuck in a state close to me after violating an order of protection so many times. It's infuriating for the victims, right? When it's a crime where there is a victim or someone who is pursuing legal action against another person, that's when I think a judge or whatever other sort of bail places, whatever you call them, and the people who put up the bail.
Yeah, bail, but whoever it can be, it's
corporations,
so
whatever. They need to look into that.
They have to. So here's the thing: it is the bail fund is a private bail fund that bailed out this murderer before he murdered. It's a private bail fund. They get donations from various people, and anybody can do this. Here's the difference. So if you go to jail for something and your bail is you're $10,000 and I'm your sister. Well, I'm going to come up with that money, and you're going to want to go probably show up for court because you know what? I put a second mortgage on my house to get you out, girl. You're going to, and we have a relationship. Most people that are being bailed out are being bailed out by family and friends. And so there's this glue. When it's a private bail fund, you don't know this person at all. 39 of the 67 people that they had bailed out over their 3-4 years in existence never showed back up for court. The average in the state of Oregon is 7%. So their percentage is 66%. You think you're doing good. You believe you're doing good. And the community in Portland for a long time supported these people. Yes, you're doing good. You're fighting the good fight. There's endemic or there's historical racism in the state of Oregon, which is true. It was founded as a white-only state. There have been problems, for sure. But to not do any due diligence, or is it the case that they didn't care? It's well, he fits the profile. Mm-hmm. He's a black man. He was a Somali immigrant. He wasn't working. He didn't have a proper place of residence. He's someone who needs help, which you could say, if he'd been caught stealing a pack of cigarettes is true. This is someone you should help. He's down on his luck or is not trying to make his own luck. Not when you have strangled this woman repeatedly and then murder her in front of her children.
Yeah.
This is, it's bad. So, that's
do you think you would want to then look into other cases in other states?
Well, that's interesting you say that because I'm noodling on a book proposal, not exactly with those set of circumstances, but sort of how the culture, especially of the past like 5 or 6 years, shapes how we look at murder in other places. And it could be very, very different situation. There's another, I'm not going to give away what it is, but another circumstance with a very, very rich white woman accidentally killed 2 children. And what kind of, what set of opinions about her are being talked about? Like, why do we give her a pass and why don't we give her a pass? And who's defending her? The culture creates, it's not like a murder in 1966 is not the same as a murder in 2023. Sure. It depends where the culture is at. It depends how we're thinking about race and sex and jobs and economy. So I am thinking about doing that, but it's a way to sort of talk about the culture, not just about the murder.
Well, I'm sure there are like parallel murders, right? Like a very similar one that could have happened in the 60s versus now, and you compare.
There's also exactly, I mean, when this article came out, I had 2 people send me things like one from New York State, one from, I can't remember another, but exactly the same situation. Someone, was in jail, was bailed out by a private bail fund, and then went on to kill. Mm-hmm. It's just, it happens now. Can the bail fund say, we fucked up and, we should do better? Well, they should, but they didn't, not in my case. They basically like, I don't see how you can blame us. It's like,
well, the other thing I found fascinating was that there were 4 different judges who had been assigned to different crimes that this guy committed. And how does that happen? And also then to know that you're the 4th judge to not impose like a heavy bail, like that seems wild. Or are they all just pawns in the political sort of scheme?
I think that what's happened in Portland since about 2018, well, definitely, when Trump was elected, Portland lost its mind. It's like everybody's hair just went on fire and they just wanted to do better. They wanted to be the exemplary city that would march longer than any other place, that would elect people that were more anti-Trump than anybody else. And one of those elections are judges. They are elected, not appointed. Mm-hmm. So of course you're going to have more liberal judges, which is fine. I don't really care where on the political spectrum you fall, as long as you're making good decisions. But I think just like any other arm of politics, you kind of have like, well, if you're going to do that, I'm going to do this. So it's not a matter of like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. It's the left hand saying, oh, well, wait, I'm going to undo that. And we saw that like one judge wanted to do this, or it was recommended by the district attorney, and then, oh, no, we're not going to do that. And it just kept working against Rachel Abraham and in this guy's favor. So will there be changes? Someone told me that I definitely believe that this is putting the fear in some of the people in the judiciary there. I think they look at this and say, what have we done? I mean, I would hope so, Joe. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're like, you know what? You got to break some eggs to make an omelet. I know that sounds super cynical.
It's a human being, like
I know that, but here's the thing. It's like I had quoted a woman in the piece. It's like, when are we going to stop extending more empathy to a would-be murderer than to his would-be victim? And that didn't happen. That did not happen. So I've also been told, I was telling you in the green room, that, there are people, I'm not very popular in Portland with certain factions. They think I'm very conservative, which is absurd. And basically someone said, Nancy Rommelmann made this all up. She made this all up. I'm like, I don't know what to say to you.
Also, that's insane because like the amount of research you did and the things you cite and clearly quote are in your article, where it's like, you can't make that up. It's like, it's public document.
On my podcast with Sarah Haplow, Smoke 'em If You Got 'em, we were talking about an issue the other day that she saw really clearly and did a really good job on. And I said, it's kind of like when you go to the optometrist's office and they put those lenses in and it's like, do you see better now? Or is it now? Or is it now? Like, you want to see as clearly as you can, right? That's the journalist's job. But if you've got a particular position where I need things to look this way, you're going to pick the lens that makes it look that way. So for the guy that tells me, he didn't say, I think I made everything up. He said I made up all the stuff about bail reform, and also he could tell I was a fascist or whatever. It's like his lens needs that in order for the world to make sense to him. And I'm sorry, I it's not about me making the world make sense to you. It's trying to see it as clear as they can. So I hope they can do better.
because I also just don't know like what you would have to gain by making any of this up.
Oh, because then I'm supporting right wingers or something. I have no idea. Because, right now, bail reform can be a bit of a divisive issue. Like you've got definitely bail reform is a little more liberal, right? And so that's like, well, your right wingers are telling you to say this or they believe this, which I don't think is true at all. I don't think anybody wants women killed in front of her children. So how do we do better?
I mean, there are now 6 motherless children.
There are 6 motherless children, and there were no funds set up for her children. Okay, this was now one reason, as I put in the piece, is there are a lot of other murders. Like you can't pay attention, but it's like, how is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Now, what do you hope will happen from your article being published?
well, I'm I didn't write it with the hopes of anything happening. You write the piece, and then it works its way into the world, and I mean, I certainly have people in Portland that say to me, thank you for writing this and injecting some sanity into this sort of insane system. And then, of course, I've got the people that are way far out, like, give it to them. They're all a bunch of libtards. I'm not interested in this. I don't want to get involved in that. I mean, what do I hope? If it could be useful to getting fewer people killed, that would be nice. But I don't imagine necessarily that it will do anything like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, I'm looking at this.
Yeah, sorry, my taxidermied mouse.
It's
stripper mouse.
it's-
Just to lighten the mood.
Yeah, that's a segue. I think it's a segue.
It is a segue.
Yeah.